What's good, y'all, and welcome to Christ Like Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Just King, and today we are going over birth and separation. But before I go into the topic for today, I'm going to pray, and we will begin. Father God, I pray that these words, this message, is able to reach all the people that it needs to within your pasture, as well as ones that are feeling unknowing in what to do and what you're doing in their life, including myself. As each of your words that may flow through my mouth as you use me as a mouthpiece can touch both me and my listeners. Anything that needs to be said, I ask that you flow through my mind, through my body, through my spirit, and let it be known so that I may be walking in obedience in all that you are. Anything else that you have for me to do or say, let it be. Let your will be done. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, birth and separation. The first piece that I want to talk about is the reason for separation. As I go to Genesis 13, verse 1, it says, "Then Abraham went up from Egypt, he and his wife, all that he had, and Lot with him, to the south. Abraham was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land." I just wanted to address that Abram and Lot, I believe this is his nephew. It is a family member. What I'm trying to get at is that they both have herds. They both have duties, responsibilities. They both have people under them. And the reason why we may be separated at times may be because of the fact that our calling and somebody else's callings and responsibilities and duties over each of our lives may be too great for one area. As you know, the Lord wants us to spread his word around the people, around the world, to people that may be lost still within this world, just as we used to be, so that we may be able to bring Christians that have walked away from the faith back with the things that he's placed over our life. And if we're in one area, it may bring two things that we have seen in this text. It may bring a feeling of strife, of unfittingness between us, and conflict. Not because we don't like each other or we're against one another, but because we have so much over each of our lives that we need to spread out and make space to grow. And that's the other point. We need more space to grow. In order for us to be within his pasture, in order for us to do his work, we need to have room to spread our wings. If we already have big wings and he's telling us that we're going to be greater, as he says within, I believe, verse 14, "And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever." As soon as he was given the room that he needed, the Lord told him that all of these things around you I have given to you. One of the reasons that the Lord may be separating us from the people could be, is not always the case, but it could be because we need room to grow alone from these people that may already have things they need to grow around too. Because if they're growing and they're spreading as well, then we're going to, even if we have space between us, even if we had a huge, if there was Pennsylvania and it was New Jersey right next to each other, but there's a lot of space and you're sitting in the middle of it. If the Lord has you spreading, let's say from one state to another state, growing and taking up more land, there's a boundary and you're going to have conflict at that boundary. But if that's not where you're stopping your growth, then there's going to be conflict. There's going to be a sense of restriction, restraint. And the Lord gives us more and separates us from others because they may stop us from growing to the entirety that he wants us to have our growth in. For him, that is. I wanted to say that because there's not always a conflict with other people because they look away or not like what you're doing, but simply because in one area, in one space, we may eat up more than what is there. Just like in any civilization, if we grow the population more than the production of food, fruit, and trees, and we may not really burn down, cut down the trees and eat too much of the livestock, people start going hungry. They may start to have starvation. That's because there's too many people in one area. So then what usually happens is immigration, or should I say migrating from one place to the other, finding food, finding resources. And one place is to nourish you while one person may need to leave that place. I know for an example within my life, there have been many leaders within the group that I'm currently in, and many have left. Many have left. There was no bad blood. There was nothing wrong. Of course, there was conflict here and there, and there was a restraint. There was a resistance. I felt spiritually as I watched it, and I knew something was going to have to change. And the Lord did it. He brought people away from it. And it wasn't because they were bad for it. It was because they needed to grow within their place, within their area that He's placed for them. And they have done all that they could have done to help and support that area that they were currently in. And the place and the group that I'm in, the leader and many others are growing because there's less resistance, because there's more room to grow, if that makes sense. Because it's not bad that there are people there. It's not bad that these people are strong within their faith and they're growing even more. It just hinders the ones that are smaller or even are on the same level because of the fact that there's resistance within that area that they need to grow in. I hope that makes sense. To put that all together, the Lord wants to bless each and every single one of us with who He is, what He has placed in our life, what He has blessed us within spiritually. And in order to do that, we need to spread out. You're not going to be able to put 16 people within one house. That's too many people. You can try. It may work. Will it be sustainable? No. Of course, there's those people that can thrive and grow, but as you grow and get bigger, there's a sense of needing to move out. There's always that standpoint in movies and pictures and other things as such that if somebody can get out, everybody wants that person to get out. And it's in a hood mindset, a hood mentality. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm not trying to be around this no more. This struggle, this crabs in a barrel mindset. Every time somebody get big, they always get shot. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm not trying to be in a place where I'm not necessarily able to grow and be able to be pushed upon, able to be poured into. I want people as smart or smarter than me. And there are people smarter than me here, but they didn't take their chance. So they're not able to lead the way for me to get to the next place, for me to be able to be that person that's building us out of the ghetto. And this is all an analogy, by the way. So I don't want nobody coming at me thinking that it's like, oh, he talking for real. It's like, no, I'm not, just an analogy. Just letting the Lord guide me in my words. But the reason sometimes that the Lord guides us out of these situations, or people out of the situation with us, is not because they were bad for us to a degree. Because if we're not growing, then I guess it would be perceived as bad, but not in a wicked mentality, but more in a that was not the best suited situation for them as well as us. Because if we're not able to pour into them the amount that they need, and they're not able to pour into the amount that we need, and we both need to be poured into in different ways, then we need to go into different directions. I like that. Similar to two different types of water for plants. I just got a cactus. That's my baby. But I'm not sure how much water it needs sometimes. And I had another one, and it had little baby cactuses connected to it. And when I put them all inside of the same pot, I questioned, is this enough room for each of these to have water? Now, cactuses, if anybody knows about cactuses, but since they're small, I call them cacti. They don't need that much water. So even when I put water in it, it doesn't need that much. It doesn't need a great deal of care to that extent, but it does need to be watered and protected and fertilized so that it can grow. And in order for it to grow fully, it needs enough fertilizer for each and every single one. There was one big one and 3 small ones. Now, when it came to me, when it was gifted to me by my lovely mother, this one was red, which shows that it was under stress already before I had it. And I wasn't sure because there are different ways of how it can be under stress, either not enough water, too much water. It could have not a big enough pod. It can be having too much sun. It's a lot of things. It's a baby. That's why I said that's my baby, because, you take care of it, you sweet talk it, you let it grow, you pray for it, you pray for your plant. But getting off topic a little bit, within a plant, we have to know how much we're pouring into it. If we're overly pouring, then that means it's already received the amount that's needed. And for a cactus within this example, cactus doesn't need that much. Sometimes you need to be in an area where you're being poured into once a week. But if this person is overly pouring into you, then they may need to go to an area where they can pour out, and where it can be received in the soil instead of being drowned in it in an area that is not ready for it. Take this as you will. I pray that the Lord guides your mind to receive and absorb this in however your situation may deem it. But there are other ways, other reasons that we are separated. But when we are separated, we have to understand that there's a reason as well as there's a way to take in the journey as we are birthing the new things that the Lord is preparing us for. The story that I wanted to go towards for that one is the story of Joseph. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole story. I just want to go over the premise of who he is, what happened to him, and how he got there. Now, Joseph, as we all know, if you don't know, Joseph was a dreamer. We start off within Genesis 37 that Joseph dreamed about his brothers, as we can see within verse 7, I believe, where it says, "There we were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." This is the dream that he had. As he was talking about the dream starting in verse 5, saying, "Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more." We can see within verses 3 to 4. "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age," meaning that this was a miracle child in a way. This was a blessing. So because of this, he also made a tunic of many colors for this child specifically. He was a favorite. He was a favorite child, both by God and by Jacob, his father, both spiritual and physical fathers. But when his brothers saw their father loved him even more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Some people in your life may not be able to uplift you because they are jealous of what you have. As you're in a season of birthing, of being born anew, of being pregnant, and they can see your belly growing and seeing that these things that you're about to sprout into, they feel a sense within themselves that they want that to be them, and they hate you for it. They don't like you because they want that for themselves, and they can't be happy for you. Now, going on from this, as we see that they hate him, later we see as we go to verse 18, saying, "Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him." They planned on and conspired to sell their brother, but first they wanted to kill him. And this is another point that I wanted to point out, that when God has you, either he's promised you something, has told you something, even in their dreams. In Joseph's dream, he dreamed that his sheaf was up and all of his brother's sheaves bowed to him. The other dream that he told of after this, which was within verses 10 or so. So he told it to his father and his brother, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I, your brother, indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" Okay, let me go back one. So it was supposed to be, verse 9, within Genesis 37, where he speaks of the secondary dream, where it's even bigger, where he says, "Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, 'Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me.' So he told to his father," and that's when his father rebuked him and said that. This means that he was in a way promised, shown through his dreams by our Father God, that he is going to be ruling over his family. And I'll go over this dream a little bit later because I feel like the sun and the moon represent something a little bit different as well. But as we go over to what happened to him within the birthing, because he's still pregnant. His stomach ain't that big, but he's still pregnant. As it shows here within verses, I would say 19. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. Mocking the very gift that he has. Instead of praising it, they mock it because of something that they do not have and they don't see within themselves. Now, as the Lord has you within his pasture, as he has these promises in your life, we can see within verse 21, it says, but Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. There will always be somebody within the situation at hand that is a safeguard for you to be brought out of the situation that the Lord has placed in your life, has allowed in your life. If the Lord told you something's going to happen, if the Lord told you that provision is going to happen, that relationship, that business, that anything, all the desires that is within his will that he has told you will happen. So the trials, the things that the devil tries to do, the adversary tries to bring to your recognition, they want to distract you from the promise. And even in this situation, as they throw Joseph in the pit. Now, I was tight when I heard this, when I read this, because they threw him in the pit, stripped him of his tunic. And then this says in verse 25, and they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from the Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh on their way to carry them down to Egypt. They threw this man in a pit and had a seat and ate and just chilled right next to him. Within our journey, sometimes people will throw us into a situation, look at our demise, not want to help us, but they decided to, as Judah, another one of his brothers, see, they're in this path. As we're being separated, there will be trials. There will be people that try to come against us. There will be things that we will be coming against. People coming against us. People telling us certain things. People doing certain things towards us. There are many traumatizing events that may have happened in many of our lives that the Lord has allowed, but it's all for great reason. For him, he was thrown in a pit where he could not get out, as it was known for a water reservoir, so he wasn't able to get out at all unless he had help. So one of his brothers decided to sell him instead of kill him. As Judah said within verse 26, so Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? And he talked about selling him to a Midianite trader. His brothers saved his life, but also placed his life at risk at the same time. This shows that the Lord's hand in their conspiring was able to get him out of this situation unharmed, possibly unscathed, because this is going over the waypoint. But they threw him into the pit and stripped him, so he could have been a little injured, a little traumatized, a little hurt. But the one piece that I feel as though is important comes up in the later chapter of when he's in jail. But firstly, I wanted to go over when he's a slave. So Potiphar is an officer that he is sold to. So then, even in each situation, this is the next point that I wanted to get to, is that chapter 39, verse 3 says, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. People can see the very thing that the Lord has placed on your life. Some will despise you like his brothers. Some will bless you and give you authority because that is the authority that they see in your life. The very thing that the Lord has blessed you to do, you will see a recurring abundance of it, no matter where you're at. If you're blessed to be a singer, there may be events where somebody's looking around. We need a birthday singer. Who's going to sing happy birthday to her? I don't sing. I don't know. It's like, what about Jessica? What about Lydia? What about Amber? What about Ambria? And then you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I know I have potential. This has happened more than once before. I've done it before. So it starts to build up a testimony. In this situation, we already seen one time where he dreamed about having authority over his brothers and his family. Even the sun and moon he will have authority over. And then he's given, as Potiphar is an officer, he's given property over an officer's property. So Joseph found in favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, he put him under his authority. This is verse 4, by the way. Potiphar made him the authority of his home. And the only thing that he knew was what was going to be on his table. He ain't know nothing else. He said, okay, you are blessed. The Lord has blessed you. I give you my blessing, as you are no longer my slave, but my house ruler. I will simply do my job as an officer, and when I come home, I simply want to know what I am to eat. And this is a wonderful example of how we should come to God, because even as we go through life and we work throughout these things and do our job, do the thing that we're blessed to do, we should simply wonder, okay, Lord, what am I going to eat today? What you got for me today? No worries about how we're going to do certain things, no worries about how life is going to go. But the next point here is within verse 7, where it kind of goes downhill again, to where he's getting uplifted. His testimony started off with a dream. Now he's already within his second piece of being uplifted, being lifted and put into authority. Still pregnant. This is all in the birthing process, pregnant. We can say that he was birthed out and where he had authority. Okay, cool. And then he became pregnant again through the next piece where it says in verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. There are so many points within this because of the fact that his next words are, but he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in this house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? We have to recognize that even in the birthing process, as we are given these things, we can say that he went through a cycle of birthing and of fruition multiple times over in his journey, but it was only into even bigger fruition, blessings throughout his journey overall. People will see the desire of hating you for your gifts that you have on your life, wanting to bless you because they see the gift that's placed on your life and wanting to uplift you, but then also the one of wanting and desiring you because of your gifts that are within your life. Within here, Potiphar's wife desires him. She longs for him. She sees that he's a man of power, a man of blessing. Some people can see that blessing and say, wow, praise God. To God be the glory for who he has made you to be. And then some other people could say, wow, that's a man right there. That's a woman right there. She is fine as wine. Let me step. But the main piece is people see what is within you and they interpret it as whatever their heart seeks. If their heart is righteous to a certain degree, then they will try to uplift you. If their heart is filled with wickedness, then they will try to either deceive you or even take your light. Your light attracts a lot of things in life. The blessing of God has on your life attracts many people and many things, and we have to be diligent in understanding that the Lord has blessed us with many things. And in this example of him recognizing of the things that the Lord has blessed him with in the first place, it is a testimony of what to do when things lure you into wickedness. For he says, this great wickedness and sin against God. How can I do this? Great wickedness against God. In the birthing process and where we're blessed with the thing, we have to make sure that we're watching our actions and making sure that we're not going away from God after we have the very thing that has helped us. We have to do the right thing no matter what. Because if she threatened to do what she was about to do, which was lying about him, saying that he came on to her and she has his cloak, and this is the second time that his clothes were taken off. These people in his clothes, they always want to take something. And I saw in a sermon to where they said, little did they know that his blessing, his authority, the things that the Lord has placed on his life is not in his clothes, but in his spirit. I was like, ooh, that's good. That hits different. Because once you realize how much he's already gone through, His brothers hated him. They threw him out. They helped him out of the pit. That's the other thing I didn't say. They helped him out of the pit to sell him so that, and then they lied about his death to his father. They helped him get out of the situation that they put him in, just to put him in another situation, just so that he can be blessed by the person that they gave him into the situation to, just so that the person that has taken him in, that has blessed him, recognize the blessing over his life, his wife, to try to take who he was and in a way draw him into wickedness, into folly, into sin. What ends up happening is that he runs away and she says he came on to him. So Potiphar puts him into jail. But the key piece of this is that Potiphar puts him into the king's jail, not just a regular jail, king's jail. This leads to him interpreting dreams. Just to speed up the story, he interprets dreams. I believe it was the chef of the king. It says in verse 1 of chapter 40, it came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. Okay, so he interpreted these two dreams. Of course, I'm not here to read you the Bible. If you want to study Joseph, I definitely recommend reading from 37 all the way up to, I believe it was 40 or 50. It was definitely 50. He interpreted these dreams, and this is another birthing process. So it first started off with him being sold into slavery. After he interpreted his own dream, a dream of telling him that he was going to be put in authority. The next thing that happened was that he was put in authority. That was his first testimony, within this anyway. But the two commonalities on both sides is that when he told his story of the dream he had, two dreams that is, his clothes were torn, his tunic was taken. When he was put within the fruition of his dream, his clothes were taken and used against him again. Both times they were used against him. The very thing that you have that is a piece of your blessing can be used against you for things that are going against the ways of righteousness. What matters are our actions after what the promise has already told and what people are trying to do, because it's a trial. He passed his trial in not sleeping with her because that could have corrupted everything. He could have been sleeping with her, stayed in that house, but then he would have never went to the next area. As I'm getting to now, as he interprets these dreams, he interprets the dream for both of these two men. One is to live, one is to die. That's some of what it is. When the person lives, he is brought back, and Joseph, I believe, says to not forget me and to say my name and what I've done for you so that I may be able to be freed out of here. Because, I mean, I'm a just man. I ain't do nothing wrong. I just didn't want to sleep with the woman. Why would I break the covenant with my wife, with my Lord, as well as with my master? So then later on, as we go over to 41, Joseph interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. I almost forgot what Pharaoh was. But yes, he interprets the Pharaoh's dream. Within 41, verse 39 to 41, it says here, Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, And as much as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. So after he interpreted the dream of Pharaoh, it came true, just as he's interpreted the men in the jail. There's his testimony of birthing the very promise through his actions, through his obedience, and the gifts that he was given. After the false accusations, after all of these things happening to him, he could have sat in a depression and just sat in there, didn't talk to nobody, couldn't say nothing. But instead, he still worked within what the Lord has placed on his life. And as we're in the birthing process and going from fruition to birth to fruition to trials to many ups and downs in life, we have to recognize that there's something that we're learning in this. There's something that God is placing on us. There's something that God is teaching us. For me, I feel as though it's concentration. As I currently don't have a job for, I would say, a few months now, it's a time for concentrating on what he has for me to do. One thing would be this podcast. Another thing would be studying for my personal trainer degree and many other things, and just being in his word and seeing what he wants me to do, to be, what type of hobbies, what way can I uplift his name, what ways can I praise him, what ways can I just use my hobbies and bring them towards glorifying him. Some of you may be in a season where you're studying for school and nothing's working, or you need to organize your schedule. That's one thing. That's one thing for me, is that my schedule, my organization for my schedule, when I actually make it, it pops off straight off the wall. Every time I make my schedule, it goes really well when I be to it, when I make sure that I get it done. But it's the activeness of it. We have to move in what we say and do what we have to do in order for these things to be birthed. Just in any type of birth, I've learned this in class, you need an extra amount of calories than what you're currently eating to supply this thing that is in your life. In Joseph's old life, he tended to the land. He tended to the sheep. He tended to what his father had. Then he moved on, and then he was tending to the very land, the whole estate of this officer that he has been placed in the ownership of. He tended to the land of his father, tended to the land of his master, tended to the empire of this Pharaoh. And this goes back to the dream that he had, the moon and the sun. And I believe that in the Egyptian times, the Pharaoh was supposed to be seen as a god, uplifting to the sun, and the moon were seen as gods as well. So then if those were to bow down to him, I believe that the Pharaoh was supposed to be representing as the sun, to where he bowed down to him, and only seeing that he was over him, only in title, and everything that he had done within that time represented that these all came into fruition, and his obedience is what brought him there. Later on, you can read it for yourself, honestly, his brothers came to Egypt, and then they met again, and then they saw that all these things that he has done, and because of all that he has come through, the Lord has taught him perseverance, preservation, and being able to have a loving and godly heart and mind as he's forgiven his brothers. But he did test them before. I have to read this again, but I'm not going to get in depth. The main takeaways of this is that Joseph had a dream. The people in his life made that dream come into fruition through their actions of selling him and sending him to that place. He walked in obedience by using the very gifts that the Lord has placed in him, whether it was for the household or whether it was for people within the situation that he was in. Each trial aided him to become better prepared for what was to come. But in order for it to aid him, he had to aid the people in that environment that he was in the first place. Because like I said earlier, if he was to sit in depression and to sit around and not do anything and not to work, not to speak, and just reminisce on the bad things that has already happened, thinking my brothers abandoned me, my master's wife has lied about me, why does this keep happening? If he thought about that instead of saying, what can I do in this situation, and just address the people that is in need, then he would not have gone as far as he did. And mind you, this is a story, so they're not saying the specific amount of time that he was there, because he is a human being. So he could have stayed in this situation and thought about it for a bit, as I'm sure anybody would think, wow, this really just happened. That's crazy. But it's not about how long he stayed in it. It's about what he did to overcome it. With that being said, each season in our lives are a preparation for something. So what season are you in? What lesson is there to be learned, and how can you use the Lord's blessing on your life to help another in the area that he's placed you in right now that you may or may not like or want to be in? Just something to think about as you're birthing in this season. I pray that each of you are able to birth a wonderful seed, and the Lord guides you in how to use your skills, your gifts, in the ways that He's blessed you to do so. That's all for me for today. I pray that that filled your heart with inspiration to keep going, to have perseverance in this promise, because it's coming. The things that He has in your life has meaning. Each place is for a reason. So don't forget to follow if you haven't already on Spotify, on Instagram. Support if it's on your spirit to do so, if the Lord wills it. And yeah, God bless.